Mutant Chronicles, Fiction, The Apostle of Insanity Trilogy, Volume 3, Dementia, by Michael A. Stackpole. Chapter 31. I stared at my brother as if he had suddenly become a snake. "What do you mean you won't help?" He held his hands up. "Wind has everyone so stirred up that I'm pulling duty assigning priorities to Sundiver shipments. The only way I could be busted lower is by being assigned to move the damn stuff on board the ship, then pilot it out to shoot the trash into the sun. I would have thought Sandra would have been worth that risk." "She would have, Quentin, but I was shown a few things while trying to drum up support for the rescue mission." Nick looked miserable, but his natural combativeness helped hide how hurt he was. Wendy Levine reported, based on her examination of Sandra on Venus, that Sandra had undergone severe trauma. While she had brain function, a lot of her higher brain processes had been disrupted or altered. Her neurochemical makeup is different. While Levine thinks Sandra could be brought back to being who she was, the whole operation would take a long time and require dedicated care. Fury blazed in my eyes. "Don't tell me you're going to start talking cost effectiveness." "I wouldn't, but I have some serious decisions to make here. I have a wife and kids to think about." "And Sandra didn't?" "No, it's not that, damn you, and you know it. For all we know, Sandra is already dead." "And if she isn't?" "Levine's report says the person we knew as Sandra is dead." I thumped a fist on my chest. I was dead, but I'm not now. I can't live with the idea that somewhere, locked up in her brain, Sandra is screaming for help. Help that only we can give her. Nick shook his head as he crossed to the Sweets bar and poured himself 3 fingers of Martian whiskey. "How are you going to do it? Wynn Raleigh has every ship in the planet sewed up." "With your help, I could get a ship." "If I help you, Wynn will have me loaded onto a Sundiver canister and shot into the sun." "He wouldn't do that. You're Anna's husband, and Sandra was his own daughter." I hammered my fist into my open palm. "I can't believe you're being like this." "Look, Quentin, I wish you all the luck in the world, but I overstepped myself when I commandeered the Skyray." He opened his hands helplessly. "This is one play I can't make." At Hunter's insistence, I met him at a greasy cafe 2 levels below Mars' red surface. "Sorry about the place, but this is probably the only speakeasy left in Sandorado." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" Hunter hunched forward over lukewarm beer. "Capital, using a lot of listening devices in construction here. Sawyer, the proprietor, lacks his privacy, so all the bugs have been exterminated. Now what's on your mind?" "What are you and your people doing for your vacation?" The Capital warrior shrugged. "This and that. You have something special in mind?" "I want to finish what we started at Eternal Vigilance. Lorraine's heading toward a little planetoid called Themis. It once was used by Bauhaus as a mining station, but they abandoned it 15 years ago when the valuable metals played out. I want to crack it open and get Lorraine back." Hunter leaned back in his seat and began to drum his fingers on the table. "It's gonna take more than a Skyray to get us there. Driving a spaceship into the vicinity of an enemy base is not gonna be easy. Themis is big as far as planetoids are concerned. It's 249 kilometers in diameter. It was undetected as a Legion base until given up by a heretic." "Okay, that's big. But it's hard not to notice a ship landing on your rock." "The ship isn't going to land." I lowered my voice. "We have the ship heading to Jupiter, and we pop 4 life skiffs. We run them into Themis, raid it, and get off. We'll have the range to get to Caliban from Themis, if we don't get picked up by our ship first. Skiffs are fine for short-term runs, but What if we have pursuit? Mitch, if we don't leave anything alive on Themis, nothing will come after us. The warrior nodded his head. I like your thinking. Do you have us a ship? I'm working on that. How about supplies? I shook my head. Might you be able to do something in that direction? I have a few favors left over from the days with the Banshees. That might get us a bullet or two. Mitch leaned forward. I don't know how many of my people I can get to go with me, but I'm in. If I'd killed Ragathol on Venus, this would have been over a long time ago. I don't like leaving things undone. I didn't think so. I placed 2 cardinal crowns on the table to pay for our untouched drinks. I'll meet you back here in 24 hours. It's okay if I bring Pam and Lane in on this. Yojimbo too if you want. They have as much of a stake as we do. I thought of Scythia and shuddered. I'll check with Titus and see if he has anything to offer. You realize this is off the books. Yeah, just for bragging rights. Mitch shrugged easily. I don't know about the rest, but this is just the sort of recreation I want. I hooked up with Ash and asked for a download of the data he'd gathered concerning ships. He told me we had 4.55392 terabytes of data, so I settled for the list of ships in port. Ash had been thorough and showed everything from Mishima Toby-class luxury starjammers to Capital's Regina class of liners like the Red Corsair that had brought us to Mars from Luna. In each and every case, the ships had been assigned extra security or were undergoing maintenance that meant they couldn't fly at all. That presented more of a problem than the extra security, though I didn't want us to have to shoot our way onto a ship just so we could go off on a wild rescue mission. Committing suicide was one thing, but murdering others for the privilege seemed decidedly extreme. Ash, these are all the ships on Mars capable of making the trip to Jupiter? The Attila stared at me. This is a list of all ships inspected, licensed, and approved for interplanetary travel. I raised an eyebrow. There are other ships capable of such travel, but not approved for it? Many craft used for local orbit missions are decommissioned and still capable of intra-orbit travel. I smiled. Would you have a file on those ships? He shot it over to me. I opened it and laughed as I saw the name come by. Nick, you son of a bitch. The reference suggests the presence of a dog, but sensors detect none. That's okay, Ash. I slapped him on the shoulder, then shook my left hand until the sting went out of it. I want a full schematic on the Sundiver, Susie Coulson. And get me a file on Emil Custer, her new captain. I'm going to go get Titus Gallicus, and we'll see if Custer still has some religion in him. Titus joined me and we discovered that Emil Custer was both very religious and very cooperative. Though the computers on board the Susie Coulson, newly commissioned as such, when Custer took over at the helm, actually flew the ship. Custer took being in command very seriously. He was more than happy to help us out on our jaunt, though I suspect that was because his bodyguard, a bubbly blonde who looked quite fetching in her short-skirt nautical attire, simply could not be left behind on Mars while he went jaunting about. Mitch Hunter's unit, Alvarez and Taylor, agreed to come along on the rescue mission. I would have liked to have had the aviators with us, but when Raleigh exerted influence through the Capital Air Force and attached them to a Martian air wing until they could return to Venus. In addition to Hunter, that meant we had Corporal David Redfield, Corporal Diane Parker, Sergeant Wendy Levine, and Corporal Mark Harris. Yojimbo, Pam, and Lane also agreed to go on the mission. Like me, Lane would use the trip out to Themis to heal up from the Eternal Vigilance raid. He'd fractured his humerus, but it had not been dislocated, so the bone would most likely be knitted by the time we reached our destination. Likewise, my ankle would be operational by then. Having more time to heal would have been nice, and healing up in a normal gravity situation would have been better, but beggars couldn't be choosers. Counting Ash, Jan, and me, our squad strength came in at 11. Titus Gallicus, Scythia, and a dozen secret warriors brought it up to a full 25. which was far fewer in number than a full assault would prudently suggest, but we were planning a raid. While we were going in against an unknown number of enemies, the lack of activity reported in and around Themis made us hopeful that Ragathal's sanctuary was lightly staffed. As I'd never seen anyone other than him during my fugue states, that Themis had evidence of his betrayal of Algaroth, I let myself believe resistance would be minimal. That didn't mean it wouldn't be tough. As the Susie Coulson lifted off from Mars and headed up to the ejection station, all of us began memorizing the labyrinth of mine shafts and galleries Bauhaus had chewed into Themis. Given the seemingly random nature of the maze, Themis might as well have been an apple that a dozen worms ate their way through. Though the confused tangle presented a problem, the fact that numerous tunnels actually provided external entry points into the interior meant we had several points of attack for our assault. Sundivers, like the Coulson, attract little attention. They normally fly up and away from the plane of the elliptic, then launch huge garbage canisters down the gravity well toward the sun. The object is to miss the inhabited planets, and many Sundiver captains like to make tricky shots, using planets and asteroids to slingshot their canisters around. Doing this is a dubious accomplishment, but when your life is spent dumping trash into a big bonfire at the center of the solar system, most anything will suffice as excitement. Once the Coulson had been cleared by planetary control, it wouldn't be contacted again until it requested a return vector. Normally, such a request would come from within a week of liftoff, but off the scope is out of mind for traffic controllers. The only person who could raise an alarm about the Coulson's being overdue on its return was the load manager. However, my brother, being new in his position, happened to overlook the Coulson's tardiness. My brother's inexperience as a load manager also evidenced itself in the nature of things found in one of the trash canisters. An incredible amount of munitions and explosives had been shipped on the Coulson for destruction. It turned out the 2 digits had been transposed on the disposal date, meaning it was all still very good. The transposition problem also supplied us with medical supplies, better than normal rations, and some very expensive environmental suits in case we had to function in a vacuum. That later situation did not arise. Small though it was, Themis had a weak atmosphere, roughly equivalent to that at the top of some of Mars's taller mountains. Mitch located a large pit mine on the surface that had actually gone deep enough to connect with the tunnels from the interior. Other surveys said the nexus had been sealed with a steel bulkhead, but we had enough in the way of thermite charges to burn through it very easily. While traveling through the vast distances of space is not very conducive to rescues in the nick of time, the Coulson had engines of sufficient power to let the ship take a considerable amount of trash off Mars. Once away from the planet, we ditched the 2 canisters of true garbage and started burning for Themis. We were able to travel faster than the ship carrying Sandra, reducing a 4-day head start to a mere 10 hours by the time our life skiffs dropped away from the Coulson and shot across the 3rd Kirkwood Gap toward Themis. We were at our most vulnerable in the skiffs, packed tightly, everyone in full armor and bristling with weapons. We braced for defensive fire from Themis. I thought we'd been hit when I felt the first bump of atmosphere, but we continued on unmolested. At the bottom of the pit mine, Harris burned a hole through the bulkhead, and we were in. Huddled in the darkness of a mine shaft, I tapped Hunter on the shoulder. "Welcome to my lair," said the spider to the fly. "Lock and load," said the fly captain to his warriors. Mitch waved us forward. This time, the spiders have bitten off more than they can chew. Mutant Chronicles, Fiction, The Apostle of Insanity Trilogy, Volume 3, Dementia, by Michael A. Stackpole. Chapter 31. End.